I hadn't spoken to my daughter in 2 years. So when my phone lit up with a text from her proposing a reconciliation dinner, I knew she wanted my wallet, not my company. My name is Zena. I am 65 years old, a widow for the past 8 years, and I enjoy a very quiet, predictable life. My daughter Brittany and her husband Derek had cut ties with me after a rather brief conversation in my living room. Derek had wanted me to take out a second mortgage on my house to fund his risky dropshipping business. When I flatly refused, Brittany called me a selfish, unsupportive mother who wanted to see them fail. They packed their bags, walked out the door, and that was that. I didn't chase them. At my age, you realize that begging for respect is a losing game. Then came the text on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Derek and I think it's time to bury the hatchet. Let's do dinner this Saturday. Just the three of us. I watered my ferns, thinking it over. Had they matured? Did they miss me? I highly doubted it. Brittany always had champagne taste on a tap water budget, and her sudden interest felt entirely tactical. Still, my curiosity won. I wanted to see what their angle was. I texted back a simple, "Okay." She immediately sent the address for a high-end steakhouse downtown. This wasn't a casual olive branch dinner. This was a performance. Before leaving the house on Saturday, I made a very deliberate choice. I took my primary credit cards out of my purse and locked them in my desk drawer. I slipped a single $50 bill and a low-limit debit card into my small clutch. If her intentions were genuine, the payment wouldn't matter. But if I was walking into a trap, I was leaving with my armor on. I pulled up to the restaurant in my small sedan, completely unaware of the ambush waiting inside. The restaurant smelled of roasted garlic, expensive leather, and exclusivity. I arrived 15 minutes early, intending to grab a quiet moment before Brittany and Derek showed up. The hostess, a young woman with a polished smile, checked her tablet when I gave my daughter's name. She guided me through the dim dining room past couples clinking wine glasses and headed toward the back. My steps slowed as we approached the table. It wasn't a small, intimate booth for three. It was a massive round table, and it was already full. Brittany sat there tapping furiously on her phone. Derek was next to her, laughing loudly. Flanking them were Derek's parents, his younger sister, and her husband. The entire in-law family. I stood a few feet away, taking in the scene before they noticed me. This wasn't a quiet family reunion. This was an audience. They needed an audience for whatever show they were planning to put on. My chest tightened briefly, a flicker of disappointment crossing my mind. I could have turned around, then walked out the double doors and driven back to the peace of my empty house. But retreating isn't my style. If they wanted to play a game, I wanted a front row seat to see exactly how they planned to execute it. I stepped forward into the warm light of the chandelier overhead. Brittany finally looked up. She plastered on a wide artificial smile and stood up. "Mom, I'm so glad you made it." She wrapped her arms around my shoulders in a hug that felt stiff and completely hollow. Derek offered a quick, dismissive nod from his chair. His parents mumbled brief greetings, their eyes already drifting back to the oversized leather menus. I took the only empty chair located at the far end of the table. I was under the impression it would just be the three of us, I noted, unfolding my napkin across my lap. Brittany waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, Derek's parents are in town, and we thought it would be great to get everyone together." Then the waiter approached, and the real reason I was invited became painfully obvious. There was no small talk. No one asked how my health was, how I was handling the house on my own, or what I had been up to for the last 24 months. The sole focus of the table was the menu, and they approached it with a terrifying level of entitlement. "We'll start with 3 seafood towers," Derek announced, handing his menu to the waiter without making eye contact. "And the thick-cut bacon appetizers for the table. For my main, I'll do the Wagyu ribeye. Medium rare. Same for my dad." Brittany flipped a page, her eyes practically gleaming. I'm going to do the whole Maine lobster. Extra garlic butter on the side. And let's get a few sides of the truffle mac and cheese for everyone. The rest of Derek's family followed suit, ordering bone-in tomahawk sea bass and massive side dishes. Nobody checked a price tag. They were ordering as if they had just won the lottery. When the waiter finally made his way around the large table to me, a brief expectant silence fell over the group. I'll just have the garden salad dressing on the side and a glass of tap water with lemon, please. I requested, calmly handing the menu back. Derek's mother let out a sharp, condescending chuckle. Just a salad, Xena. You really need to live it a little, you can't take it with you, you know. That comment connected the dots in my mind. 2 weeks ago, I had finally finalized the sale of my late husband's vintage restored Mustang. It was a private cash sale, but word travels fast in our circles. Brittany must have heard about the sale and immediately assumed I was sitting on a mountain of disposable cash. This whole charade was designed to celebrate my money. The food began to arrive in waves, crowding the table with silver platters. I ate my salad in silence, watching them rack up a bill that was about to cause a massive explosion. The gluttony was genuinely something to behold. The table quickly became a battlefield of cracked lobster shells, half-eaten steaks, and empty appetizer plates. Midway through the meal, Derek snapped his fingers to get the sommelier's attention. "We need something to toast with," Derek declared loudly. "Bring us 2 bottles of the Reserve Cabernet, the one from Napa." I knew enough about wine to know that anything with the word reserve in this kind of establishment was going to sting. When the sommelier returned, he presented the bottles with deep reverence. He popped the corks and began pouring the dark red liquid into the oversized crystal glasses. When he reached my side of the table, I simply placed my hand over my water glass. "None for me, thank you." Brittany rolled her eyes, her cheeks flushed from the heavy food. "Mom, relax. You're always so tight with everything. You should enjoy yourself now that you have a little extra padding in your bank account." There it was. The absolute confirmation. I didn't take the bait. I simply looked at her, my expression blank, until she uncomfortably shifted her gaze down to her lobster tail. The dinner dragged on for another hour. Desserts were ordered: creme brulee, massive slices of chocolate cake, and double espressos. Derek leaned back in his chair, rubbing his stomach with satisfaction, looking like a king who had just conquered a feast. His father excused himself to the patio to smoke a cigar. The conversation around the table was entirely about trips they wanted to take and renovations Derek wanted to do to their house. I was invisible, a ghost, sitting at the end of the table, only useful for the purpose I was about to serve. Then, the waiter walked over, holding the black leather folder that held their fate. The waiter placed the black leather folder precisely in the center of the table. A heavy, immediate silence fell over the group. Derek looked at the ceiling, suddenly very interested in the light fixtures. His mother started wiping her mouth slowly with her napkin. Brittany reached out, picked up the folder, and opened it. Her eyebrows jumped slightly, but she quickly recovered, pasting that same hollow smile back on her face. She closed it, pressed her manicured fingers against the leather, and slid it directly across the white tablecloth until it rested right next to my empty salad plate. "You're paying right," Mom, Brittany announced, making sure her voice carried across the table. "Think of it as making up for the 2 years you missed. A gesture of good faith." I opened the folder. The total sitting at the bottom of the receipt was $4,250, with an automatic 20% gratuity already factored in. 7 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. They were waiting for me to pull out a premium credit card and meekly fund the feast they had just devoured. They wanted me cornered by the social pressure of the upscale dining room and the presence of Derek's family. I didn't feel angry. I felt incredibly clear-headed. I unclasped my small purse. Brittany caught Derek's eye, giving him a quick, triumphant smirk. I pulled out my single $50 bill and laid it flat on the table right next to the black folder. Brittany frowned, her smirk vanishing. Mom, what is that? That covers my garden salad, my tap water, and a generous tip for the waiter, I stated, pushing my chair back and picking up my coat. I caught the waiter's eye as he passed by and motioned him over. He stepped up to the table quickly. Excuse me. I instructed, my tone polite but unyielding. Split the check. My portion is right here in cash. You can hand the rest of the bill over to Derek. The reservation is under his name. Derek's face turned white, but I was already putting on my coat. Wait! 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 Derek stammered, sitting up straight and abandoning his relaxed posture. You can't just leave $50 on a bill this big. You're supposed to cover this. I buttoned my coat, looking down at him. I didn't order Wagyu, Derek. I didn't order whole lobster, and I certainly didn't order reserve wine. I also didn't invite your parents. You hosted this dinner. You pay for it. Derek's mother gasped, leaning forward. Well, I never. What kind of mother leaves her own daughter holding the bag like this? I looked directly at her. The kind of mother who knows when she's being used as an ATM. Brittany grabbed my sleeve, her voice dropping to a frantic hiss. Mom, you can't do this. Derek's cards are maxed out. We don't have the funds to cover this tonight. Stop embarrassing us and just put down your card. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. You made your choices tonight, Brittany. Enjoy your reconciliation. I turned my back on the table and walked toward the exit. I didn't rush. I kept my shoulders back and my head high. Before I even reached the hostess stand, I could hear Derek raising his voice at the waiter, panic setting in as the reality of a nearly $5,000 bill crashed down on him. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped out onto the sidewalk and I took a deep, cleansing breath. The valet brought my sedan around and I slipped into the driver's seat. Before pulling away from the curb, my phone started vibrating aggressively against the cup holder. Brittany calling. I silenced it. 10 seconds later, a text popped up. You are destroying my marriage right now. Get back in here. I powered the phone completely off and tossed it into the passenger seat. I drove home through the quiet streets watching the city lights pass by. I slept perfectly, but I knew they wouldn't just let this go without a fight. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat on my back patio, and finally turned my phone back on. The screen immediately flooded with notifications. 30 missed calls, a barrage of texts from Brittany and a few from Derek. Derek had to call his boss and beg for an advance to pay the restaurant. His family thinks we are trash because of you. You're completely cut off. Don't ever speak to me again. I deleted the messages without reading the rest. They always threatened to cut me off when they didn't get their way, completely missing the irony that I was the one who had just walked away. But I knew Brittany's habits. When she felt wronged, she looked for ways to balance the scales. I finished my coffee, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to my local bank branch. When Brittany was in college, I had opened a joint checking account for her emergency expenses. I hadn't put money in it for years, but her name was still technically on the profile, and she had a debit card linked to it that occasionally pulled from my Maine overdraft protection. I sat down with the banker. I need to close account ending in 4109 immediately. No transfers, no holds. Just close it permanently. The banker clicked his mouse a few times. Done, Zena. The account is closed and all associated cards are deactivated. My next stop was the local hardware store. I bought 2 heavy-duty deadbolts. Brittany still had an old spare key to my house on her keychain. I drove home, grabbed my toolbox, and spent the next hour swapping out the locks on the front and back doors. Just as I finished tightening the last screw on the front door, deadbolt, a familiar car screeched into my driveway. Derek threw the car into park so aggressively the tires scraped against the concrete. Brittany threw her door open and marched up my front walkway, her face flushed red with anger. Derek trailed closely behind her, looking exhausted and thoroughly humiliated. I stayed completely still inside the hallway, watching through the small peephole. Brittany shoved her old brass key into the doorknob. She tried to turn it. It jammed. She pulled it out, inspected it, and shoved it in again, putting her shoulder into the door. When it didn't budge, she realized what I had done. She started pounding her fist against the solid oak. "Mom, open this door right now. I know you're in there." I didn't unlock the door. I simply slid open the small grated speakeasy window at eye level. "Can I help you, Brittany?" I asked, keeping my voice completely neutral. "You changed the locks," she shrieked, pointing a finger at the grate. "After what you did to us last night, you have the nerve to lock me out of my own childhood home. And I just tried to buy gas, and my emergency card was declined. You canceled the account. The house is mine, and the account was mine." I corrected her smoothly. "You brought me to a restaurant to foot the bill for your husband's family. You played a stupid game, and you got a stupid prize." Derek stepped up, leaning over Brittany's shoulder. "Zena, you owe us that money. I am completely humiliated at work because I had to beg my manager to cover your mess. You need to write us a check." "I don't owe you a dime, Derek," I replied. "You ordered the food. You digested it. You pay for it. Now get off my porch before you give the neighbors a worse show than you gave your parents." They stayed on the porch for 10 minutes. But what happened next showed me exactly who my daughter really was. Brittany kicked the base of the door one last time, screaming a few choice insults before Derek finally grabbed her arm and pulled her back toward the car. On his way out, Derek purposefully kicked over one of my favorite ceramic garden gnomes, shattering it across the pavement. I just watched them back out of the driveway and speed down the street. I closed the little grated window, grabbed a broom, and swept up the broken ceramic. I wasn't upset about the gnome. It was a cheap price to pay for absolute clarity. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was my son, Leo. Leo lived 3 states away and had always kept his distance from Brittany's constant drama. "Hey, Mom." Leo started sounding completely exasperated. "Brittany just called me crying. She gave me some wild story about you losing your mind at a restaurant and abandoning her, leaving her in thousands of dollars of debt." What actually happened, I walked into my kitchen and leaned against the counter. I gave Leo the short, unvarnished version of the evening. The ambush, the lobster, the reserve wine, and the $47.50 bill pushed into my lap. Leo stayed quiet for a moment before letting out a loud, genuine bark of laughter. "You just left $50 and walked out." "Oh, Mom, that is incredible." Derek is probably losing his mind. "He is," I confirmed. "They just came by and tried to use her old key." "I changed the locks this morning. Good for you." Leo supported immediately. "Don't give them a single cent. She's been bragging on Facebook for weeks about how much money Derek is making. Let them figure it out." After hanging up with Leo, I opened my phone settings. I went to my contacts, found Brittany and Derek's numbers, and hit block. I did the same on my social media accounts. 6 months passed, and the peace I found was worth more than any bank account. It has been over half a year since the incident at the steakhouse, and my life has never been quieter. There was no grand, tearful reunion. I didn't receive an apology, and I certainly didn't expect one. Through Leo, I heard that Derek is still working weekend shifts to pay back the loan he took from his boss. Brittany complains to anyone who will listen about her cruel mother who abandoned her in a time of need. I let her talk. The opinions of people who only value you for what you can buy them hold absolutely no weight in my life. Instead of dwelling on it, I used a portion of the money from the vintage car sale to completely remodel my sunroom. I bought new wicker furniture, installed large windows, and started hosting a weekly book club for women in my neighborhood. Last month, I took a 10-day Alaskan cruise with my best friend Martha. I am living my life entirely on my own terms. Sometimes as mothers, we are conditioned to believe that we must tolerate disrespect just because it comes from our children. We fear that setting boundaries will leave us lonely in our later years. But I learned that the worst kind of loneliness isn't sitting in an empty house. The worst kind of loneliness is sitting at a crowded table, surrounded by people who only view you as a resource to be drained. I don't harbor deep resentment. I simply packed up my financial support and locked my front door. If Brittany ever truly wants a relationship with me, it won't be built on a foundation of luxury dinners and unpaid tabs. But if she never reaches out again, I am perfectly at peace with that too. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that the word family should never be a blank check for disrespect. For years, I thought being a good mother meant endless sacrifice and keeping the peace at all costs. But the truth is, you cannot buy genuine love, and you shouldn't have to. Setting a boundary doesn't make you a bad parent or a cold person. It just means you finally realize your own worth. You don't have to sit at a table where you are only valued for what you can provide. Protecting your peace of mind is the best investment you will ever make. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family situation or set a hard financial boundary with someone you love? I would really love to hear your experiences in the comments down below. Let's share and support each other. If you found this story relatable or just enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future stories.